And we are live once again.
We are live. Jolly good.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Yes, I hope you're all okay after the horrendous tornadoes and
good grief.
God, Mother Nature is really, she's
mad as hell, and she's
I'm
not going to take it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. But we have sunshine today here in California.
Finally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So nice to be with you all again.
Yep. There we go. So today, I am really excited to have our guest, Jay Bergen, that I did a quick little stand-up at the bottom of last hour. Jay is known as Lennon's lawyer, which for reasons that shall unfold very shortly. After many years, he decided to write a book about a very interesting case, which is kind of a tit for tat sort of a thing, but I don't know anybody that really could have John and Yoko on one side and take on the mob on the other. And so I think without further ado, we will bring on Jay Bergen Esquire. And there he is now. Hi, Jay.
Hello, Jay.
Hi, Angie. Hi, Ruth. How are you all?
We're great, thank you.
Everybody's good.
Good.
And you?
Thank you very much. I'm great. Thank you very much for the invitation to be on your show.
I'm delighted to have you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know that a lot of our viewers will know you from having met you at various fests and so on. But for the few that don't, tell us how you got started and what your background is.
Well, I was raised on Long Island. I'm a real New Yorker. My mother's family, my father's family were from the Bronx. I went to Fordham College and then Fordham Law School. And after law school, I was very fortunate to clerk for Sylvester J. Ryan, who was then the chief judge of the federal court in Manhattan. And I started practicing law in I graduated from Fordham Law School in 1962. 62, and clerked for a year or so with Judge Ryan, and it was also a Fordham grad, and then started practicing law. And in 1972, I joined a law firm called Marshall, Bratter, Green, Allison, and Tucker, and that's where I came to represent John Lennon in 1975.
Wow. I always felt sorry, and I've been a receptionist many times in my life, and I was offered sort of temp jobs at law firms, and I could never wrap my head around saying all those names every time the phone rang, you know.
Yes.
You know, good morning, Manat, Phelps, Phillips, Rothenberg, and Tunney. How can I help you? Great. Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll go and work at a food truck. I'm good. Wow.
Well,
so John and Yoko were clients of the firm, right?
Actually, when John and Ringo and George left Alan Klein in 1973, my senior partner, one of my senior partners, David Dalgenis, who was a real estate corporate lawyer, he was hired by John to represent John and advise him in connection with the dissolution of the Beatles, which, as you remember, was being negotiated then and took quite a while to straighten out.
Yeah.
And so in 1974, late 1974, early 1975, there were rumors that this Morris Levy, who was notorious, he was known as the godfather of rock and roll. He was tied into the Genovese crime family in Manhattan. A very, very bad dude. In fact, Morris was the model for the Jewish gangster in The Sopranos, Hesh Rabkin.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. That tells you a lot. Nice boy.
There was this rumor, and it was going around the office, and I went to David and asked him, you know, since I'm a trial lawyer, if anything happens with this case, I'd like to be involved. Excuse me. So I had previously been involved when I joined the firm in 1972 for a couple of years where I was representing Terry Knight, who was the founder and the manager of Grand Funk Railroad. And they had a falling out. And so we finally settled that litigation in early 1974. So on February 3rd, 1975, David asked me to come to his office. He handed me a letter from Morris Levy, dated in January, saying that he had an oral agreement with John Lennon to record and market about 15 or 16 old rock and roll songs from the 50s and 60s and market that on a worldwide basis. And David asked me to go to a meeting that afternoon at 5 o'clock at the offices of Capitol Records, which I did. Halfway through the meeting with 3 of Capitol's lawyers, the conference room door opened and in walked John Lennon.
Oh, wow.
Now, needless to say, I was a little bit stunned.
I bet.
For a minute, but we all introduced ourselves.
Great.
And started questioning John about this Levy and what was happening.
Yeah.
And finally, the decision was made that John had been trying to finish this album of Oldies But Goldies, as he called it.
Yeah.
And I asked him how long it would take to finish it. And he said, I can go into the studio tomorrow and finish it in 2 days.
Wow.
Because everybody was anticipating that Levy was going to start marketing the album at his version of the same album at any moment. And so that was the decision. John and I left Capitol about 7 o'clock together, rode down in the elevator. And I believe that was the first night that John returned to Yoko Ono in the Dakota.
Wow. After his lost weekend with May Pang.
Yes, after his lost weekend with May Pang, which I had read, a little bit about. But
so backing up a little bit for our viewers, the question would be, why on earth would John Lennon agree in the first place to make an Oldies But Goldies album for a mobster?
Well, it started off that Levy was notorious for bringing bogus copyright infringement cases. And in 1970, he sued John and Paul, the 2 Beatles publishing companies, claiming that John's song that he wrote, Come Together, infringed the copyright of the Chuck Berry tune, You Can't Catch Me, which Morris owned. And that case was finally settled in October of 1973. John agreed that he would record 3 songs owned by Morris Levy's publishing company on this Oldies But Goldies album.
Right.
And that was the origin of the deal, because in October of 1974, he got together with Morris and his business advisor, Harold Sider, and it was at this meeting that Morris conjured up the idea that John had given him permission to release the album. And in October of 1975, 74, when John finished the album, before he had finished it, Morris kept pounding away at him, I want to hear my songs, I want to hear my songs. And in November of 1974, John, big mistake, John gave him a rough mix of the album.
And that would be Walls and Bridges, correct?
No, that was the rock and roll album that he used this rough mix to put out what he called Roots.
Roots, gotcha.
Yeah. Wow.
I understand. And so Morris didn't like what he heard.
Well, he didn't care.
No.
He just slapped this thing together, put it out, started selling it. John rushed and finished the album in the 2 days. Capitol released it, I think, on February 13th, 75. And Morris pulled the album, his album, which was called Roots, and sued John, Capitol, and EMI.
Good grief. And so, enter Jay Bergen, Esquire.
Right. right. And, you know, I always thought right from the beginning, Angie and Ruth, that Morris was, that this was part of his grift.
Yeah.
What he was trying to do here was maneuver himself, because he sued not only John, but Capital and EMI.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was just trying to grift himself into some kind of a deal
Yeah.
with John, Capital, and EMI. And
settle out of court and get a load of money.
yes, and
Yeah.
when nobody responded, and John didn't, you know, kind of take the bait, he then sued again. And this was the first lawsuit was in a New York State court. The second lawsuit, a couple of weeks later, was in federal court. And John had made it very clear right in the beginning that he was not going to settle with Morris.
Wow. So I mean, did any of you have to have kind of protection, or were you nervous for your security? Because, you know, he didn't have the greatest resume reputation, did he?
Well, you know, John and I never, it's interesting, John and I never talked about that. He thought Morris was a character.
Yeah.
Because Morris claimed he had polyps in his throat, so he talked like that. But he sounded like, you know, he sounded like a gangster.
Yeah.
He came from the Bronx. He was kicked out of school, I think, in the 6th or 7th grade, and he had been hooked into the mafia, you know, ever since.
Yeah.
So, but he was very dangerous. But we never talked about it. I don't think John knew how dangerous he was.
No, maybe not. No.
But I always thought that the case had too high a profile for Morris to try to, you know, kind of muscle us.
Yeah, maybe that's, your safety is because you're not some just anonymous schlub from New Jersey who owes him a bunch of money. You know, you might disappear, but if you're John Lennon, you're probably safer than most.
Yes.
But so how did the case unfold? What happened next? I mean, obviously everybody's going to have to buy your book and find out all the nitty gritty, because we can't do that in half an hour. But
the big mistake was filing the case in federal court.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think, again, his lawyers and Morris were trying to, you know, kind of push us some more, because New York State cases, civil cases like this, they move very slowly.
Yeah.
In a federal court in New York City, they get assigned to one judge the first day, as soon as it's filed. And he's responsible for everything.
Wow.
And the judge that got the case right in the beginning, Lloyd McMahon, had been on the bench for 16 years. He was a very experienced a trial lawyer and judge. And I knew that this was good news because he ran a very fast calendar. I knew Judge McMahon. I had appeared before him, and I knew this was good news. And I told that to John.
Wow.
So the case, you know, kind of moved right along.
Right.
I skipped over one thing that the two of you might enjoy hearing about. A few weeks after I met John, he called me one day and he said, "Can you come up to the Dakota tomorrow morning? Yoko wants to meet you." And I said, "Well, sure, I'll be there." So I go up there at 11 o'clock, and I'm ushered into their parlor, their living room, overlooking Central Park West. And Yoko comes in. She's all dressed in black. And one of the people that worked for them followed her in and she sat on a couch, and I sat on a chair across from her. And the person who came in put down a tray with a cup of black coffee and another cup with a spoon in it, and I think it was black caviar.
Oh.
So John was not.
Coffee and caviar.
Coffee and caviar, yeah.
This is 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
So John was not there. I didn't see him.
Wow.
And Yoko said, "Thank you for coming." And she proceeded very politely to question me for
Give
about
you
an
the
hour.
once over, in other words, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, questioned me, and she had read both of the complaints. And Yoko was very smart.
Yeah.
She had read the complaints, asked me a lot of questions, and then finally she said, she stood up and she said, thank you very much for coming, and I left. And it may really sound silly thinking back to it, but I did not realize for a long time after that if she hadn't liked me, I
You
would
were
have been
out.
out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That was your audition and you passed.
Yes, I was, and I didn't have a clue because
Wow.
if they want me to talk to her, I'll talk to her. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah, but if we'd had cell phones and texting back in the day, you probably would have texted John and say, "Did I pass the audition?" It's absolutely
yes, I would.
Yeah, no, Sarah's just saying, Yoko is still, but especially business wise, as smart as a fox, and I ran the whole show. So but she is the person responsible for creating, the estate of John Lennon and the licensing and all of his drawings and doodles on baby food and baby clothes and the John Lennon songwriting bus. She managed to, but she was the daughter of one of the largest bankers in Japan. So, she grew up in a business family.
Yes.
She just happened to be left-brained as an artist, but
That's
very
right.
right-brained as well, and very astute at business, no doubt. I mean, it's the gift that still keeps on giving.
Absolutely.
I mean, John left us in 1980, but she's made it sustainable enough for Sean and for the rest of her life. So she is super smart.
Well, she definitely likes to drive the bus.
Yeah.
Well put. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with strong.
No.
No.
But back in those days, 30, 40 years ago, it was kind of the exception to the rule, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But from then on, throughout the whole preparation for the trial and everything,
right?
She did not say a word.
Oh.
And it was the night before the trial, in January of '76, that I was staying in a hotel because I lived out in New Jersey and I couldn't do the commute every day during the trial. And I told John where I was, and he called me about midnight and he said, "Well, can Yoko come to the trial?" And I said, "Oh, of course. Certainly. I should have invited her, but this was like 3 months after Sean was born."
Oh.
And so she came to every day of the trial that John came to for 20 days.
Good grief.
Never said a word. Never said, "We should do this," or "Why are you doing that?"
Yeah.
And the first day at the lunch break, I got into their limo, and I said to John, "What would you like to eat?" And he said, "We're only eating fish."
Okay.
So I said to the limo driver, "Would you please take us down to where the old Fulton Fish Market was, not far from the courthouse?"
Yep.
And because I knew there were some wonderful seafood restaurants there.
Uh-huh.
And he pulled up in front of Sloppy Louie's.
Lovely.
Which had been there for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
And we went in there and had lunch. And we ate every day that they came to court. The 20 days spread over January, March, and April.
Yeah.
We had lunch at Sloppy Louie's.
Good for business for them. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was talking to May Pang recently, she actually came out here last year, and we had lunch at the chili place. It's very famous for its chili. It's right on Santa Monica and La Cienega. What's it called, Mark? Barney's Beanery.
Barney's Beanery.
And so John absolutely loved those kind of places. And we have one down here in our village called Cantillini's Salerno Beach that's been here forever. And evidently, it had Christmas decorations put in one year in the late 60s, and they never ever took them down until about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And John used to just say sometimes to them, "Let's go to Salerno Beach in Playa del Rey." So literally walking distance from our house is one of John's old favorite haunts, because sometimes he'd just have a hankering for Christmas in the middle of July, and that's where they go.
Well, this place was not fancy, no tablecloths,
Nope.
plastic cups.
Yeah.
Lovely.
People never bothered us. It was kind of a hangout for people who were, because we weren't far from Wall Street, the financial district.
Yeah.
And it was great. And obviously they really liked it. So that's where we ate.
Right.
Plenty of fish.
Plenty of fish.
Plenty of fish,
Good old fish and chips never killed no one.
So I tell you what I was wondering, how did you cope with the press once all this got started? Were you bombarded with journalists and photographers? And
No, because this was when John dropped out of the music business.
Right.
And that started really in late 1974. He appeared before Elton John at Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
On Thanksgiving night.
Yeah.
But after that, he just dropped out. So nobody, and this was in the early days of going through security.
Yeah.
The radar or the
metal
electronic stuff.
Yeah.
But so we went in and out of that courthouse every day, and there were nobody passed the word, oh, guess who's here? Because there were a couple of articles in Rolling Stone magazine.
Right.
But that's it. And there weren't any crowds following the trial either.
Quite different from how things are now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're a celebrity and you walk into a restaurant, it's not, I like to call Twitter and X, I've renamed it Twix now. But, we didn't have Twix and cell phones in those days. Martin and I were in Albany, New York about, 10 years ago. And there was a very popular app called Foursquare. And I like to give shout outs to local restaurants and chefs. I'm a big foodie. And we checked into a German place in Albany, New York. And as we got there, I checked in. I said, hey, I'm at so-and-so, going to have the pretzel or whatever it was, because, I'm twisted and salty, so I need more pretzels. And I went to the ladies' room, came out. There's a guy with a big white long lens. And I saw your post on Foursquare. I followed you down. Paparazzi guy.
Oh.
I mean, you really have to learn to say where you've been after you've been there nowadays. But to think that nobody really cared that John Lennon was in court and nobody covered it is quite astonishing nowadays. That wouldn't happen.
Well, in the in the 8 months it took to get the case to trial,
it's as long as that.
Sure.
That was very quick. Very quick.
Yeah.
John and I walked around New York, and people basically left him alone. I took him to lunch at the Oyster Bar in Grand Central Station.
Wow.
And also at a place in the Waldorf called the Bull and Bear.
Yep.
But, I'm sure you know that his one rule on autographs was, I'll give anybody an autograph as long as I'm not eating.
That's right. Not when I'm eating.
That's right.
Once it's over.
Yeah.
But I have one funny story to tell you about when we'd walk around the city after the second day of his deposition taken by Morris's lawyers. When the deposition ended, it was right around 12 or 12:30. It was a beautiful day in May of 75, and we were walking up Park Avenue towards the Waldorf. Mm-hmm. And suddenly this middle-aged woman stopped in front of us and said, "You're George Harrison."
Oh,
perfect.
And John said, "Yes, I am. Thank you very much." and then she walked on, and we continued walking and started laughing out loud. But with John's sense of humor, I know that if she had asked for an autograph, he would have signed George's name.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Well, but either way, he just made her day, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Oh, yes.
She thought she met George Harrison.
Exactly.
Funny one time with John. We'd all been to see the premiere of How I Won the War, and Cilla Black and her husband were hosting a supper for us all. They lived on Portland Place at the time.
In London.
In London, yeah. So we all traipsed to the movies, and then we went to Cilla's apartment, and we were in limos. And as we were getting out of the limo to go into Scylla's apartment, a very drunken, teetering man in top hat, white tie and tails. It wasn't Fred Astaire, by the way. He thrust up to John. He said, aren't you one of those Beatles chappies? And John said, yeah. And he said, well, sign this. It's for my daughter, Amanda, or whatever. He said, sign it for her. I hate you myself. And John said, you do? Well, no. Kept on walking.
Yeah, sign it to,
and the man was horrified.
Sign it to a Ariadne or something.
Yeah.
I personally, I can't stand you. I think you're
stand
dreadful. John said, really? Well,
I loved it. Yeah.
typical John Winston. Absolutely. Oh dear.
Well, he had a great sense of humor.
Oh, not half. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why he would have enjoyed his time with you, is because you're not fawning all over him. He just liked normal people and normal things and simple food and simple places. And
that's right.
He just never, I mean, yes, he lived in the Dakota. My goodness, what a building. But, you know, if he's got a choice of a place to go, he'll go and eat in Central Station. Why not?
Well, and once I got over the shock of him walking into that conference room, he was, we got along, and he was just another client. That's what I tried. That's what I tried to how I tried to treat him.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
As it should
So
be.
how long you alluded to 20 days? How long did the trial actually last?
Well, it lasted about 20 days, but it started in January, as I said, and then on the second day of the trial, we had a mistrial, and we had to start all over again. And the mistrial is explained in detail in the book.
Yeah.
But we started all over again with a different judge. So it was most of January, and then we took, there was a non-jury trial at that point. Then we didn't do anything until early March, and then it was finished in, John's part was finished on April 7th.
Wow. And did Levy and his muscle group show up every day and kind of try and stay you down, or?
No. Although he did show up on the first day of John's deposition, and he was sitting in back of his lawyer. Oh. And as John testified, he started making faces and shaking his head and, kind of acting like a 6-year-old. And finally, I said to his lawyer, if Mr. Levy doesn't stop acting like a child and making faces at all of Mr. Lennon's answers, we're going to get up and leave.
Good.
And his lawyer said, well, he can't, I'm sure he's not doing anything wrong. I said, I don't know how you could tell that, because you're looking at me,
right.
And I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at him in back of you.
Right.
So,
well, in Liverpool, in Scouse, we would have said, what, you got eyes in the back of your friggin' head? Right?
Well, I couldn't say that because everything was being taken down on the record.
But that was probably what was going through John's head. Just ask him if he's got eyes in the back of his friggin' head.
Well, after the lunch break that day, Morris did not come back. And he was only there for a couple of days when he testified, and
wow.
he was a terrible witness, because every time he opened his mouth, he was lying.
He probably
he couldn't keep the story straight.
He probably shuffled off to the ball pit at Toys R Us. God, it's so funny, isn't it? These guys think they're, all that in a bag of chips. And
well, Morris was your basic bully.
Yeah.
Although he did have muscle behind him, but if you pushed him, he'd back up.
Yeah, we know those characters.
Oh yeah, plenty of them.
We've seen them in pop culture before. but we don't talk politics on this show, so there you go. So
now, when did you ever think about writing a book when that was when it just wound down, or was that a later idea?
It was a very late idea.
Yeah.
Because this is the only case I kept a lot of the file. I had 5 or 6 banker's boxes with all of the transcripts of the trial, the Beatles and John Lennon records that we used as exhibits. And I carted those around with me, Angie and Ruth, for over 40 years through a number of house moves. And finally, in 2017, I kept thinking, what am I going to do with these things? And I went out to the garage. They were in a storeroom, and I sat down and I started reading John's testimony, and I suddenly thought, oh, there's a book here. There's a story here that hasn't been told.
Yeah.
And this was a period of John's life when very few people knew what he was doing or what he was like.
That's right.
And we spent a lot of time together preparing for depositions and the trial and everything. I mean, John testified for 310 pages.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
Spread over, a number of times testifying. And that's when I decided to write the book, and it took me about 5 years.
Good grief!
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Karen, our friend from Edinburgh, Scotland, is asking, when all was done and dusted in court in the years that followed, was there ever any regret shown from Levy's side, or did he and John ever meet up again or speak again? Do you know if there was ever any kind of reconciliation?
No. In fact, we won everything, and including we had counterclaims. We won damages. Capital and EMI was awarded damages, and Morris was so furious that he settled with Capital and EMI for $170,000.
Wow.
And made us defend the entire appeal, because he wanted to, he just didn't want to cave in and settle with John. So they never met again. When we had the appeal in January of 1977 in the Federal Court of Appeals in Manhattan, Levy was not there.
Wow.
I don't think they ever met or talked again. And, he basically, he basically just tried to exact revenge on John by forcing us to defend the appeal. And we won the appeal.
Wow. Brendan McKinley is asking, so the book is called Lennon, the Mobster, and the Lawyer. And if you add a .com after that, Brendan, you will find it. And there is also, since your name's McKinley, I should tell you, there's also a stunning audio version by Scott R. McKinley that's available. Yes, there you go. And it's
here's
silver
the book. It's Lennon, the Mobster, and the Lawyer, the untold story. There's the silver medal for best first book nonfiction. Bob Gruen, the famous rock and roll photographer, who was a very good friend of John and Yoko's. He wrote the foreword to the book, and a lot of Bob's photos are in the book, including, if we have time, I have a quick story to tell you. One day, first of all, one day Bob showed up at Sloppy Louie's and took a picture of us having lunch, and then John sent it to me later on as kind of a souvenir. But another day when John was testifying, I saw Bob Gruen in court, so we didn't get a chance to talk to him. But on the way back uptown in John and Yoko's limo, I said to John, and this story's in the book, I saw Bob Gruen in court today. What was he doing here? Oh, John said, I told him to come down and take a picture of me while I'm testifying. And I said to John, that's really not permitted. It may be a violation of law. And John said, oh, it's okay. He kind of waved me off and said, oh, it's okay. He covered the camera with his coat. And I said, why the picture? He said, well, someday I'm going to write an album of songs about all of my and the Beatles' legal problems, and that's going to be the cover.
Oh my gosh.
And John, John was always thinking ahead.
Always.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And when you think now what he accomplished, and he was only 40 years old when he died. I mean, you've only just got started.
Yeah.
It's just
astonishing.
Don't get me started on guns.
Yeah, no, please.
Yeah, God,
Please.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Otto is commenting. He's a award-winning producer, music producer from Phoenix, Arizona, and he's got a great series. You guys check it out on Roku and YouTube and Amazon too. It's called therecordingartist.com, and he's just saying what a great idea for an album. So go write it with some of your artists, Otto. You know, you just don't know. He also said that there's another some great stories about Morris Levy. There's a book called Stiffed, MCA, the Music Business and the Mafia.
Oh, that's right. I've heard about that.
Yes.
I think there's stories about Morris and Irving Azoff, and lots of people are featured in there.
Yes.
You know.
I have that book. It was one of the books I bought when I started doing some research.
Yeah. And so how did you go about, what was your writing process, and how did you get a publisher?
Well, I started really doing some research, but then I met I have a friend, a woman who's a director and a playwright, and she initially suggested in 2017 that I do kind of a multimedia show. And in the process of doing that, I wrote what was going to be the outline of the show, and that kind of got me started on the book.
Yeah.
Wow.
And getting it published was not easy. I contacted a number of New York agents. Nobody was interested. But then I had met through a combination of introductions, a writer and a documentary filmmaker named Robert Gordon from Memphis, Tennessee. And he's an expert on Southern blues, and he wrote the definitive biography of Muddy Waters, a terrific book.
Yeah.
Well, it was Robert who was kind of a mentor over those years and kept saying, Jay, just keep writing, just keep writing.
Yeah.
I did make contact with a woman in New Jersey who's an expert on writing memoirs, Lorraine Ash, and she kind of helped me also pull the book together and finalize it. And Robert Gordon, recommended a friend of his who has a small independent book publishing company in Memphis, Tom Graves. I sent several chapters to Tom Graves. He called me up. He said, "I love this.
Great.
Can you cut it back to about 300 pages?" And he published it.
Fantastic.
Great.
Yeah, I love those stories. It's like Angie's publisher, Stephen Wilson in New York. He operates out of his house in Irvington. The company's called Imagine and Wonder, and they have a ton of Beatle books. And it's just, if you go with these big houses, I think that's every writer's dream in the beginning. I want to be with Simon and Schuster or Penguin or what have you. But if you're a first-time writer, you're very often just a number on a spreadsheet, and you don't get that extra organic attention that somebody who really cares about the project. If you go with a small independent publisher, they know all the tricks. They have all the same outlets. But I love to hear stories like that. That it's just the universe led you on a path to the right publisher, to the right place.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Ruth, you're right. What I kept gathering, talking to agents and everything, that even if I got a deal with a publisher, they'd just turn it over to some young editor, and it wouldn't be my book.
Right. Well, and not only that from the artistic side, but what I've learned, and Angie's got 7 books in the marketplace. It's a question of, do you have a fan base and you want to sell them one by one and sign them, which is kind of the approach we take here? Or do you want to trust that Penguin's sales force knows a guy who knows a gal at Barnes & Noble, and they're going to sell 50,000 books? Well, those days are, those deals are few and far between.
Yeah.
Yes.
Barnes & Noble now, good luck selling them anything. And if you might sell them a dozen copies on sale or return. And if they don't sell them in 120 days, you get them back and you pay the shipping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, there's so much to know about the publishing industry that being with these small independent publishers, another one of Angie's books was published by David Charlesworth of Probabilistic Publishing, a friend of a friend in Houston, who just, you can pick up the phone and talk to them and say, hey, how can we, maneuver this or do that or promote this? It's so great that books are now, they're becoming a thing, and audiobooks are becoming podcasts, and
Yes.
it's all out there. And I think that the day we lose books is going to be I don't think we'll ever lose books, to be honest.
I hope not, certainly. Yeah.
But these big behemoths that came along, these big publishing companies, and swallowed stuff up, and if it wasn't working in the first 3 weeks, they just dropped it. It's horrible.
Right. Well, I'm delighted the way it turned out, because exactly on this Thursday, I'm giving a talk at a local library about 15 miles from where we live, and we're going to have a big crowd. I'm going to show a video that I had of the multimedia show I did, and sell some books, and I'll sign them and meet people, and then we'll have a Q&A after.
Great.
Yeah, we're doing an event in July at the Ventura County Museum through our friend Ivor Davis, who has also written some really good books. He was on tour as a member of the British press corps with the Beatles in 64 and 65.
Right.
And he's very well connected in that sort of meet and greet, grip and grin literary world. So we're looking forward to that up in Ventura in the summer. And we'll have a Mrs. McCartney's afternoon tea, and we'll meet people. And, that's really how you do it. If you have a specialized book like we all do that's to do with the Beatles, sort of birds of a feather flock together, and one person will tell 3, who will tell 10, who will tell, and eventually over time, it sort of just organically grows,
That's right. It's created its own sort of community, the whole thing.
Yes. And that's, when we've been going to, my wife Diane and I have been going to the Beatles Fest since in Chicago in 2022, right after the book was published.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
And it grows from there. People learn about it. These kind of specialty books aren't sort of what I call one-hit wonders there, where they race up to the New York Times bestseller overnight. They take their time, and the word gets out. If it's a good book, you'll be invited on more podcasts, and the word will spread. So we hope everybody goes to Lennon, the Mobster, and the Lawyer.com. And if are you going to Chicago this year? Have you decided yet?
Oh, yes. Yeah. August 9th to the 11th.
At the Beatles Fest in Chicago. You can find out more about that at thefest.com.
Right.
And so in closing, was there anything I didn't ask you that you've never been asked that you'd like to talk about?
No, but I would like to say that this whole experience of representing John really changed my life.
I bet.
For the better. And if you do read the book is kind of what they call a memoir portrait. So it's a memoir and a portrait of both of us, but mostly of John. But if you read the book carefully, you'll see how it changed me and changed my life for the better. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I kept schlepping around these 5 or 6 bankers boxes, because there was always a connection to John.
Right. Well, he has mysterious ways of appearing in people's lives still to this day. We get a feeling, or all of a sudden, walking across a wooden floor, and there'll be a little white feather in the middle of the floor. Like, oh, okay. There he was. There he was. What am I supposed to infer from that? What's he trying to tell me? Come on.
I wonder what he would make of the scene today.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine the social media and the paparazzi and all the intrusion?
Oh, he'd be taking the piss. He'd be online taking the piss all day long.
Well, what I think one of his songs, best songs that I love, and it fits into the time that I knew him, is Watching the Wheels.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, my friends are asking, what are you doing? You're not in the game and everything. Well, I'm just watching the wheels go
The
round.
wheels,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm still watching the wheels, I tell you.
At
Yes.
At
94.
94,
Exactly.
absolutely.
So our regular viewers, including Paul Moody, who I think is in Cincinnati today,
Oh,
will know that we, for our special guest, because Angie has a limerick book out and she just keeps writing. So I can't keep adding to the book. So we do them live for you, and I'd be happy to email it to you if you think it's amusant at all. So thank you for
Oh,
joining
thank
us
you.
today.
thanks,
thank
Jay.
you.
It's been
And we're going to
great.
sign off with your very special Dr. Angie McCartney penned limerick. So a 1, 2, 3. So Jay is well versed in things legal. He presided with manner most regal. He won John his case with both humor and grace, and pounced on the perps like an eagle.
Ta-da!
Thank you. Please send that to me.
I will.
I
I'll send it to
absolutely
Please.
you.
And thank you. It was delightful seeing both of you. And even though you're 3,000 or 3,000 miles away, and being on your show. Thank you very much.
You're
Thanks a
so
lot,
very
Jay. God
welcome.
bless.
And kids, go over to the, if you friends missed it, we'll be on our YouTube channel in a couple of hours. So
Great.
we'll
Yeah.
see you guys all of a sudden.
We're
Thanks.
gonna put it up, post it on my website and my social.
Good.
Great. Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you all next
Great to
week.
see you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.